Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are now live. Thank you very much for those that have actually joined into the webinar of today. We are actually proceeding with the webinar of our engagement into this very youth month of June 16. So celebration. What we do now is that we are going to actually get into the navigation of corporate politics as an executive. We are having amongst us here and present who is Mr. Ashley, who is the business coach, who will be our guest speaker and the presenter or the facilitator of the corporate politics continuously. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate June 1976 in this year of 2021, it's equally important to move into understanding corporate politics in the board or the boardroom. This particular session comes directly when the National of Young Professionals advocating for inclusion of young people into acceleration of executive position. I must say that, colleagues, there is a slow phase, as we have understood and related to the stats, in relation to the young people inclusion into executive positions, either into board or either into executives as day-to-day executive operations. But while navigating to advocate for such positions, it is actually important to put it into our minds in understanding what is expected when we arrive into the boards and how the boards or executives operate. So it is correct, and you are in the platform today to really understand the position of such. You would understand that June 1976, they have actually done their part in either dealing with the politics of the time. So ours today is to deal with the politics of inclusion of young people into executive positions. We are more than many years after democracy in 1994, and still up to today, young people are struggling to access such positions. But we have said we will advocate this up until we realize that our mission is actually achieved. As Steve Biko once said, young people, the ball, you need to take it into your role. And what we are saying today is that we can't play outside the role. We need to be playing inside the role. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dasuhopa. I'm the National Chairperson of Young Professionals. With me today, I'll be with the executive coach. So who is this executive coach that we're talking about? I'm telling you about Mr. Ashley Rasevoja. I normally call him Ash. So Ashley is one of the most sought after facilitator, the speaker, the executive coach, the business coach, and the future trends analyst. And is also a commentator in South Africa. He is a member of Coaches and Mentors Associations of South Africa. Comments in short. As a future trends analyst and commentator, he helps audience understand the forces that are shaping the future right now. He also points the clues that they can use to help them see their own futures, personally and in their organizations. Prior to founding his company called Ngwako Rice International, Ashley had a successful career within the financial sector. In two of the bigger or big four banks in South Africa, Standard Bank and Absa. That's when I knew him from Absa by then. While still at Absa, Praesh served as a chairperson of the Diversity and Inclusion Forum in Limpopo. Praesh served as the president of Polokwane Chamber of Business between 2016 and 2019. During the same period, he served as the deputy chairperson of Limpopo United Business Forum. Over and above running a successful coaching business, Ashley is currently serving as the chairperson of Ria Ledwaba Foundation. Ashley believes that the reason why human beings and organizations are anxious of the future is because they lack a memory of the future. Through these consulting interventions, he empowers individuals and organizations to create a desirable future. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to welcome Praesh, but it's important to note to you that after he has made the presentation, there will be time for Q&A so that we are able to understand while he has unpacked number of everything to us. Welcome on the engagement of young professionals, BMF today, Praesh, in this evening of 2021 year, in particular for young inclusion. Praesh, I'm calling you to accent to the podium. The visual podium, by the way, not the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, class, and good evening to the executive of Young Professionals, members of the Black Management Forum, guests, and all people who are attending this evening. Some few weeks ago, I called class. I said, class, there's something that I want to do in partnership with BMF Young Professionals. And one of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you today, this evening, you won't get it at a business school. They don't teach this at a business school. You can go to First Business School, you can go to Gibbs. They don't teach it during the management development program. So I have realized that it's very important to empower young professionals who are future executives. If you understand and grasp what I'll be sharing with you this evening, you should be able to navigate corporate politics and become successful and ascend to the top and stay there. Because what we have seen is that there's a lot of Black talent that is coming out of university. I mean, we have a lot of educated young Black people who are going into organizations either through graduate recruitment programs or any other program that they find themselves participating in. And what happens is that they rotate, within various divisions, and they get appointed permanently. Then over the years, they tend to leave that organization that they joined and they loved that organization. But if you ask most of them, why have you left that organization? Besides better prospects and better salary or better working conditions, most of the time, people will say, politics in that organization. There are a lot of politics in that organization. So this evening, I'm going to share with you how to manage those politics and how to play politics in the organization without being political. I know I'm being controversial, but you'll understand as I continue. How to play politics without being political. Because there's a way that you can play politics without being political, climb the corporate ladder, become successful, and stay there at the top. I'm talking about both private sector and public sector. Organizational politics are all over. They are in private sector, public sector, NGOs, sport federations, churches. Wherever there's an organization and there are positions, you'll find politics. So I'm going to take you through my presentation, and later we'll then have Q&A session. Is my presentation on the screen? Are you able to see?
Yeah, Praesh.
Okay, Thank you. Plus, we normally wake up to news headlines. I mean, I have a few here that I want to share with you on the screen. And how many of Black young talent who leave organization and they don't get to make headlines? I guess it's a lot. There are a lot of young people, Black executives who leave organizations, but they don't make news headlines because they are not executives. And that to me is a problem, because what happens to a pipeline that we need to feed senior management roles and executive roles? So we need to make sure that we equip young Black people with skills to be able to navigate and manage corporate politics and stay, so that they can stay and progress in the organization. Putuma Ntlego's career. He came up the ranks. He worked for a bank, Standard Bank in this case. Then he moved to MTN. He worked up the ranks. He became a CEO. And he retired as a CEO, and he became a chair of the board of MTN. There's something about this gentleman. And if I look back at decisions that he used to make as a CEO, I then picked up that Mr. Ntlego had what I call corporate political mastery. So he understood how to manage corporate politics so that he can ascend to the top positions and stay there. Because the idea is to ascend and stay there. Right now, the challenge we have is that most Black senior executives ascend to the top, but they don't have staying power. So that is a challenge for me. But we have examples here. We have real leaders who have shown us that it can be done. So I think we need to coach and mentor our young, aspiring Black executives to learn how to manage this corporate politics. When you get to a new workplace, normally they invite you to attend what we call induction, right? And they set the whole week for it. You attend the whole week, and there's somebody who comes there, and the idea is to orientate new recruits on the organization's formal rules and behavior. And those rules are more limiting policies that are viewed as critical elements of the organization's formal governance system. They also then orientate you around the hierarchy in the organization. So they'll show you who's the CEO, who's the CFO, and that makes you to then, from day one, understand seniority in the organization. And then you get to understand that if I meet one of these people in the lift, how must I behave? Because already they are showing that this is the hierarchy, this is how things work. And HR will come in and tell you about the rules. If you do this, you'll be suspended. If you do this, you'll be fired. But what I've learned throughout my corporate career is that induction covers the formal rules. And the question is, who orientates new recruits on the informal rules of the organization? Whether we like it or not, there are informal and written rules in every organization. And over a period of time, if you are politically savvy and politically aware, you will pick up those rules. So it's very important that we need to understand that they are corporate politics and they are part of the unwritten rules. And I need to find out who can help me understand those informal rules in an organization. I was reading, I tried to understand what is politics, and what is the nature of politics in organizations. Because I'm a bit old school, colleagues, so I went to a dictionary, right? So I looked at the Oxford Dictionary, and it says organizational politics can be defined as activities aimed at improving someone's status or increasing power within an organization. Some of us will think politics are only found within political parties. Some of us think that you only find politics when you're working for a public sector organization. You'll be surprised, friends and colleagues, that there are more politics in private sector organizations than in political organizations themselves. What really happens in this politics in the organizations? There are issues about enemies, there are allies, there are people who want to pay revenge, there are people who are spying, there are people who are spreading lies about other people, there are people who are spreading rumors, backstabbing, and people that are spreading scandals of other people. So it's very important that we understand exactly what is the nature of organizational politics. So most people who are in positions of power, they want to improve their status, by ascending to the next position. And in that way, it increases the power they have within an organization. That's the nature of human beings. The sooner you understand that, the better. And that's why we aspire for senior positions. You don't want to stay in the same position for 10 years. You'll go look for another position outside of the organization. So there's another question that you may be asking yourself, because now I spoke about corporate politics, I spoke about hierarchy, I spoke about aspiring for senior position. You may ask yourself, what is the difference between power and politics? And corporate power or organizational power is the ability to take action to change the course of an organization, or at least a small part of it. And you are able to do that because you have a specific title. You are referred to in the organization either as an executive or as a CEO. But when we think of power in an organization, we normally think of your position granting you that power, either through your job title or your responsibilities or your reporting relationships or formal or informal rules. Are you aware, or do you agree with me, colleagues and friends, that there are some employees that might be considered dangerous in any organization, or we're saying they are powerful because they have an ear to the CEO or to the HOD or to the MEC or to the premier or to the president, depending which organization you are working in. That's where comes power that is vested on politics. That power is not derived because of a job title or a position in the organization. It's because it's linked to political power. You may ask yourself, especially in these big corporates, that have been in existence for over 100 years, that there are a lot of Black people who go into organizations and they want to change these organizations in terms of transformation. But you find that most of the time, there's resistance, right? Hence, I'm talking about how does history impact politics. There's a saying that all habits die hard. At least in large organizations, they usually do. And you'll agree with me, if you have worked in a large organization, you have at some stage experienced resistance to change. I like to call it human inertia, borrowing a bit from Newton's second law. A body in motion tends to stay in motion. People are conditioned to keep doing those things that have worked for them in the past. So they'll tell you, look, we've been doing things this way here for the past 20 years. So who are you to come and want to change things? So it stands to reason that if you're joining an organization that has had a high level of politics in the past, it will likely stay that way for a while, regardless of what anyone says, including the CEO. CEOs come into organizations with the aim of transforming the organization, changing the organization. But because of the history, the CEO finds or gets resistance. And what ends up happening? The CEO leaves. Because you are fighting against 50 years of history. People are used to doing things in a certain way. So it's very important that when you get into an organization, you understand the history of the organization and how they are used to doing things. What are the informal rules that are not written, but are practiced and taken seriously? And how, as employees, we are human beings, right? So we tend to find ways to respond to political environment because we are social beings. We respond to political environment. So if you accept my thesis that politics are present in every organization, the question is no longer politics, yes or no, right? You agree with me? It really becomes how you respond to it. Because if you don't respond to it properly or in the right way, you end up not achieving your goals or your objectives. Because it's all about understanding politics, managing them in a way that you will achieve your goals by climbing the corporate ladder. So over the years that I have been in corporate and in government, I've noted 3 different responses to corporate politics, one of which has 2 subsets. I'll talk about them now. And the first 2 are by far the most common. So while I'll be sharing this with you, I want you to think about your organization. And the idea here is to give you tools to see when to behave, how to behave in a specific environment, because you cannot behave the same or use the tools the same way that in different environments. So you have to be able to understand the environment and say, what tools should I need here? how should I respond? Try and be flexible, because if you are flexible, that's the way you're going to navigate through politics in your organization. So try and be flexible, and you see you'll be able to navigate organizational politics. So I found two types of politicians in organizations, or I found, let me call them employees, right? Avoiders and neutrals. So what do avoiders do? These are typically people who are either not grasping organizational politics or hate dealing with them with a passion. These people tend to say that they hate politics stuff so much that maybe if one just pretend it doesn't exist, it will go away, right? They say I should just put my head down, work hard, and maybe it won't impact me. I know some of you, they are saying, yes, that's me. I only want to go to work, deliver on what I'm supposed to do, earn a salary, and go home. Those are the characteristics of avoiders. I'm not saying it's a bad character to have. You can apply it in a different situation if the situation requires that you do that. Some of you might be familiar with the TV show, reality show called Survivor. So there are some guys there who never seem to understand the game or the rules of the game. They get surprised when they are voted out because they fail to play organizational politics. You can see if you're watching that show that there's a lot of politics at play in that show. Those that can't play politics don't survive in survive. Same as in organizations. And then we have the neutrals. Neutrals generally understand the political realities present. And over time, they begin to understand how to navigate through them. And most of the time, neutrals, they tend to find behaviors of other people to be unfair because they understand politics. Because neutrals usually find politics distasteful, they often ignore them until they've already sustained some serious damage. Don't avoid them. Don't ignore the politics. Take them head on because later they'll cause a serious damage. I'm still continuing with the avoiders and the neutrals. So if you are one of those people, you should probably resign yourself to working only at the bottom, of the corporate ladder. Because at the top there is hard. And if you start climbing while ignoring the political environment, you're probably going to fall off the ladder, probably in the short order. And colleagues' ambition to climb the corporate ladder and political avoidance don't go together. So if you are an avoider and you have ambition of becoming the CEO or an executive in an organization, you must understand politics. You must understand corporate politics because you won't succeed for long or you won't survive. So some neutrals do become very effective power players if they didn't find the power player class of tactics repugnant. So anyone who wants to climb the corporate ladder needs to become at least a competent neutral. Because if you're a competent neutral, it means you are able to become an avoider and also play politics. So even if it is distasteful, neutrals need to keep company politics in the front of their minds. They know that even though the policy says this, but what happens is this. They understand what happens on the ground. So without constant vigilance, they are just likely to become a victim as an avoider. If you're a neutral and you're not vigilant, you are going to suffer like how avoiders will suffer. Friends and colleagues, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong to be an avoider or it's good to be a neutral. But you have to understand what skill or to use in what environment. When to become an avoider and when to become a neutral. Don't fix yourself in one, put yourself in one space and say, I'm an avoider or I'm a neutral. You need to be flexible because in organizations, to be successful, you need to be flexible, you need to be dynamic. And that also calls for that kind of behavior in managing and navigating corporate politics. And we are coming to one of my interesting types of corporate politicians. I call them power players. You know them, we know them, we all know them. Either they are there in the church, they are there in public sector organizations, they are there in corporate organizations. So power players attempt to manipulate the political environment to their own or someone else's advantage. So these guys, they're the ones who are laying traps for the rest of the company employees to trip over. They're the ones who are always checking people out to say, you know, that one must not succeed in doing what he's doing because he's not their ally, but they don't just like that person. But over and above these power players, I've then observed two types of power players. The one I call the street fighters, and the other ones I call them the maneuverers. I know we always say in organizations that, that one is street smart, right? And it's because we are playing politics. We are playing organizational politics. So let's look at these fighters, street fighters and maneuverers. How do they behave? What tactics do they use? So street fighters, you know, they are, like I said, they are power players. I tend to call them terrorists of the organization. So they tend to be overt with their tactics, but can deposit some pretty powerful munitions, many of which are targeted at specific individuals or small groups. And over time, these guys make a lot of enemies, and there's often quite cheering if they have their own tactics turned against them. So if they find someone who's street smart like them, you know, they tend not to like it, and they complain about fairness and all that because somebody else is playing their game. You know them. You always see them in organizations. You know, They are troublemakers. They always cause trouble wherever they are. In meetings, everywhere, they just cause troubles. And then we have the maneuverers. These guys, they're at the top of the political food chain. These guys are top. They have the most advanced weapons, making and disguising skills, and like to use them covertly, right? So unlike street fighters, maneuverers often times have extensive networks of allies they can tap into in order to work their manipulations. They have a good network in the organization. They have good support and good allies, and they're influential. And a significant concentration of them, they exist at the top of the organization. And most of them, they have position power, and then they convert that position power into political power. So that's a very strong combination, to have a position power and a political power in an organization. And these guys, they tend to see politics more as a game they play to win, and they're usually strategic in their actions. So they're there to say, these are the wins I want this week, and I'm going to win no matter what. So they always want to make sure that their positions at meetings or in organizations are the ones that are accepted or adopted. I know you're sitting there now and asking yourself, okay, I see myself as a neutral. Am I going to succeed, in this organization? I have ambitions of becoming a CEO in this organization. I've been identified as part of talent potential of this organization. How do I behave? Whether you're a neutral or a power player. But what I want to share with you in the next few minutes is some of the basic skills you need as a political neutral. Remember, you might have a strategy to say, my strategy is to be a political neutral. If you have adopted that as a strategy, then you need to have a game plan. What are my tactics? So number one, what you need to do as a political neutral is to learn the landscape. It is critical to understand who your allies are in the organizations and who your enemies are. And you should build connections with as many groups as possible. Just don't give them the impression that you fall into their camp, in their camp exclusively. They must just understand that you are there. So knowing who's on your side is very important because you might need them. I always tell people that if you're junior in an organization, you need to have somebody who represents you in the boardroom. When management is sitting and deciding on increases, deciding on promotions, you should have somebody in the senior executive management level who will say, Ashley is ready to assume this role because in the past 6 months, he has done 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you don't have that kind of a person, you are likely to be stuck where you are because nobody knows about you, right? And the second skill to master is don't burn bridges without thinking things through. So try and maintain your relationships unless the consequences of doing so become very high. Don't burn your bridges. Even if you are moving from one organization to another, don't burn your bridges unless you are forced to do that. If you leave organizations, try and leave the organization in a peaceful manner. Try and have a professional relationship with whoever, even though you're not agreeing on certain issues. You need to understand why you are there, right? One day, you are going to need these people or the same person somewhere in an organization to go up. And they will say, oh, remember last time when you left, you did 1, 2, 3. In every organization, there's something that is valued. You need to figure out what behaviors are valued, right? Is it results? Is it loyalty? Is it sacrifice? Or whatever is seemed to be valued in that organization. You need to find out what is that. Some leaders will want you to show loyalty towards them so that you can be promoted or get a better increase than others. But you need to, part of learning the landscape is figuring out what is valued in an organization. And that is one of the things that you won't be told about during induction or orientation. You won't know, so you have to learn as you go. And the fourth skill, friends, is that you need to be careful about what you put in writing. Try and put as little as possible in writing. Don't put things that will incriminate you. Don't put things that will be used against you in the future. They say 10 years ago, you said this on an email. And that time, the stakes are high. You're supposed to be, you are being interviewed for a CEO position. And the next skill is you need to learn how to lend support before you need it. I always tell people that be a go-giver before you become a go-getter. That simply means you need to go and provide support before you need it, because those people that you have supported will support you when you need support, right? And the sixth skill is to make sure that risks are tilted in your favor. So it's very important that every time you're taking on a risky project, make sure that there's a likelihood of success in that project. So you have to prepare and try and get as much support as possible within your peers, and people should know what you're busy with. And once that happens and people are aware about the risk that is involved in that project, when the outcomes come unfavorable, everybody will say, you tried your best. But don't try and be smart and say, I'm going to do this alone, I know all. But you can see that this might come back and it can backfire. So try and manage your risks. And the next skill, colleagues, is that presentations count. Make sure that when you have an opportunity to present before your senior executives, make sure that you prepare for that presentation, because that opportunity doesn't come many times. So make sure that you prepare and leave an impression on them. So every time they think about that subject or that topic, they must think about you. You should be the go-to person regarding that topic. And the eighth skill is what I call, don't hide bad news. If you pick up something that is negative or undesired results, don't hide it from your seniors. Share it with them immediately, because that way they can see that you are honest and transparent. So you must be open about what's happening around you. And the ninth skill is that don't badmouth your enemies. If you don't like someone in the organization, don't badmouth them. Keep that to yourself. Don't tell somebody that, I don't like so-and-so, because that so-and-so will end up knowing. And the 10th skill is keep complaints to yourself. Don't go around telling people about your issues at work, telling your colleagues about issues at work, because that will have a big impact on your career, because you'll be seen as a gossiper in the organization. Because in every organization, there are processes and procedures that you can follow when you're not happy. But if you start sharing it with other colleagues, they then make sure that that gets to the ears of the bosses, and it becomes a bit of a challenge for you in the future. We're now getting to the skills that you need if you are aspiring to become a power player, right? Like I said previously, these skills, you can use them in different circumstances. You don't have to put yourself in a box and say, I'm a power player or not. But if you decide that you want to be a power player, you need to actively manage your reputation. What do I mean by that? You are that guy who wants to be seen as smart. You will be that guy who wants to be seen as hardworking, innovative, and whatever the organization thinks is important. You want to be that guy. So you have to portray yourself as that guy or that person, because you are a power player, right? And the second skill that you need is to cultivate a mentor. So what you find mostly with power players who are in top positions or they're in senior positions, they are always willing to mentor junior colleagues, because they want to teach these junior colleagues what they have learned through the years, not through business school or through induction, but how they managed to move up the corporate ladder by playing corporate politics in their favor. So find yourself a mentor who seems to be playing politics well, so that they can help you how to move up. And one of the skills that I've seen over years while I was in corporate is that we don't ask for what we want. We don't go to leadership and say, I'm aspiring to go into this position in 3 years. What is it that I need to do to prepare myself so that when the opportunity comes, I'm ready? You mustn't think that they will talk about you or they'll think for you when they're in boardrooms. You have to go and say exactly what your aspirations are, so that one day when you say, I'm leaving because I'm not getting the opportunity that I want, and I have indicated to you 5 years ago that I'm keen or I'm preparing myself for this role. And the fourth skill, I know some of you won't agree with me, is that you need to set the bar incredibly low. Most executives are taught how to put together targets for their subordinates. right? So if you find yourself in a position where you are setting up targets, set the bar credibly low and argue with your boss why you're setting your targets that low. The reason why you do that is that you want to exceed those targets, and then you are seen to be doing well. Because if you have agreed to me that we can set my target at this level and I exceed them, you can't come back and say to me, but compared to somebody who's somewhere in a similar role, they have achieved so much and you only achieved 20 instead of another person achieved 30. You can't say to me that I didn't do well. We agreed at the beginning on that target and I exceeded that target. So that's what power players do, because they are able to influence their way up. And the fifth skill that you need is that you need to provide some original thinking. It's very important that you provide original thinking. So, and that can position you because they know that every time there's a discussion on an issue, they want to hear your view because you provide original thinking. They know you are that person who will always come with a different view or perspective. That's how power players position themselves in organizations. They make themselves to be needed. They make themselves to organizations to say they can't do without me, so they need my thinking. And another skill that you need to learn how to promote yourself. Most of us are very modest. We'll be doing very well, and we don't talk about our successes and achievements. If you don't do that, nobody will know about them, and not everybody likes you in an organization. And some people are competing, with you. So you have to promote yourself when you get the right platform. And power players are very good at doing that. When they find an opportunity, they always promote themselves. And how they do it, they'll say what they've achieved and go back and say, but also I would like to thank the contribution of so-and-so towards achieving this goal or target. But at the end, they have promoted themselves. So they just want to make sure that those guys that help them to achieve the goal that they've achieved will be there next time. And another skill that power players master, or you need to distance yourself from failure. Don't associate with failure. And they always do that. And that you do it by making sure that you plan properly, and it goes back to my point of setting the bar credibly low. Because if you fail in a project, your chances of going up the corporate ladder or staying up there, if you are there, won't succeed or will be very slim. And if you decide to be a power player, expect betrayal, because there are other power players in the organization. They will betray you because they are also interested in achieving the goals that you want to achieve. They are also interested in making sure that they have the power that you have or you are aspiring to have. And power players are very good at investing in scapegoats. If something goes wrong, they always find someone to blame. But I know most of us will say, yeah, because of the values and the company vision and mission, I cannot behave in this way by investing in scapegoats. If you are a real power player, you you find that these guys do it is playing dirty. They play dirty politics because they know what they want. And if investing in scapegoats is going to be one of the things that help them to get to the top, they will do that. But all in all, what I want to leave with you is that if we are going to use the skills of a power player, use them sparingly and use them strategically, because at some stage, people will get to understand how you behave. And if you manage or you master these skills and you do other things, you are likely to succeed in your goals in an organization. So in closing, probably colleagues were asking, hey, this man has been speaking for a while now. Remember, I get paid to speak. So this is what I do on a daily basis when I'm saying I'm going to work. So my call to action, colleagues, politics in organizations involves two primary dimensions. That's the will and skill. By the will, I mean you need to have the will to learn and understand the landscape of the organization that you're in. Any organization, it might be a political organization, might be a church, sport federation, private sector, Stockfell, you know they are always there, those politics. And you may ask me, what do you mean by skill? So skill is determined by natural talent, education, and practicing something more and more. You then become an expert at it. And I believe that those who are the most emotionally intelligent have the greatest natural talent for corporate politics. I always teach emotional intelligence in a workshop format. So we understand that emotional intelligence has become one of the critical competencies to have as a leader to be successful. If you don't have emotional intelligence, your chances of success are very low. And education can be academic, but in the practical sense, you need to get yourself a mentor or a coach. So, because that will be the best source of political learning. You need to have someone that you bounce things off with them. And if you combine both high will and skill, then I say you have got the makings of a successful corporate politician. You need to, I'm going to repeat, combine both high will and skill. Then you have the makings of a successful corporate politician. But remember, not all good politicians succeed, and not all poor politicians fail, right? So you need to create a balance. But in the workplace, it's important because there's something called job performance. You can be as political savvy as you are, but you need to perform in your job as well and exceed targets. Even though you're educated, you have the will, performance is important. My last part in short, colleagues, I'll say ultimately it takes all three: political skills, political will, and finally job performance to keep ascending the corporate ladder. Thank you, colleagues, for your indulgence.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Praesh. I'm telling you, you actually nailed it. You know, while seated here, I've actually identified myself. I was just smiling. I said, wow, who am I here? Therefore, I decided that I'm a maneuverist. I'm also a neutralist. I don't know if either others have managed to identify themselves or not, but I'm telling you, this presentation is just directly dealt with the issues that we're dealing with, more specifically at work, and dealing with the executives and the senior managers at working place. Just to touch a bit on certain things, which I actually found them very, very more and much and great pressing. That number one, we need to ascend to the top positions. And while we ascend, we should be able to stay there. Of which this is the view that young professionals were actually advocating for. And we liked the idea that we started showing us the headlines as to how senior leadership have actually left the organizations. We've seen by Basani, we've seen a very shock by Daniel once they came into Bath as well. But in fact, actually showing us as well, how does the history impact the politics at the working place, and how should the other people not leave positions while they are on a senior positions. Indeed, politics are present in each and every organization. There's no one which will say there are no politics. And I like the idea that there are politics at working environment which are more severe or are more than the politics, even in a political organizations. You know, when we just hit it that one, I just laughed. I said, wow, this is where we are, because we provided actually the types that we have said there are two in terms of your analysis of the employees that people do. The others we find that they are the avoiders, and the others you will find that they are neutralists. And that is where we've actually weighed ourselves. Where are we here? Am I an avoider, or I'm someone who is a neutralist in that position? And even taking it to the decisions, how do people make a decisions? Some they avoid to take decisions, some they just become neutral and say, let it pass, we'll see tomorrow. Wow, indeed, we've actually learned something more and more different from what we do learn in the books. And even unpicking the issues of either a street fighter and a maneuver. So some of the things that I've just learned today and picked it up, and perhaps they happen even at the working environment. When we're speaking about the street fight, I associated with another colleague of mine. I said, wow, this one suit whosoever at work. When we spoke about maneuver, I said, wow, this is whosoever's doing this at work. And this is what I'm actually doing as well at work. And this is a very clear picture that even at most corporates or other small practices, they actually happen. And actually giving us even the advancement of skills if we need to aspire into power players, what we should be actually be dealing with at the end. I like to thank you very much for this presentation that you have made. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going for the Q&A sessions. We will see up to 7:30 as to either will be able to have covered number of the Q&A sessions. What I will do for those who are able to raise their hands or so, I will take at least 3, and those who are able to take on the chats, there is a chat and the Q&A session there. I'll just go there and read for those who are having questions there and be able to allow Praesh to answer those questions. I will read 3 of them and take 3 hands of the people who want to say something about the presentations or what they have actually learned about the presentations. But I've got one question, Praesh. Perhaps you can actually prepare this one while others are also preparing their questions. So I want to check, can an executive member be an avoider, or is only happening when a person is climbing into a senior position? In terms of your responding while you are preparing that, I would like to check the link in between the senior and also the person who is climbing to be the senior. Who should be the avoider basically between the two? or an executive who is an avoider, is it actually allowed, or is it a correct practice for a senior person to be an avoider? Over to you, Praesh.
Thanks, Lars, for that interesting question. So what I've seen in organizations is that I'll give two scenarios. There are positions that you find that they can't find the skills easily in the market. They are rare skills, right? Let me give you an example. A big company or organization is looking for a CFO. They say they want somebody who's a CA, so many years of experience, and all that. That person is last, will meet the criteria, you get appointed, right? So what takes you in that position, or what qualifies you into that position, is the skills that you have, the qualifications that you have. You are a CA, you have so many years of experience as a CA, right? And you get there, then you want to be an avoider, right? What I've seen with avoiders in that role, in those roles, they don't stay for long. You can ascend to the top, but you won't last, because the position requires you to understand corporate politics or organizational politics to a certain extent. So getting to the top sometimes is not a problem, but staying there is a problem. And we can give examples that we saw in the past in South Africa. People were ascended to positions as CEOs, but they were never CEOs where they came from. And they didn't last. So if you really want to be an executive or a CEO, avoid being an avoider. Try and be a competent neutral, because you are able to play, in both instances. You're able to say, here I need to wear a power player hat. Here I need to wear a neutral hat. And once in a while, there's some noise that is not necessarily crucial, you avoid it. So the idea is to try and master how to move in between. Like I said, you can get to the top as an avoider, but whether you last there is something else. Thank you.
Right away. Clearly on the nail. Thank you very much. I've just tried to check with the colleagues of mine, either there might be one person who perhaps really want to understand certain things, but I've checked on the Q&A, there's nothing. It seems as like, because you are the coach, not only a teacher, it seems as like we have covered a number of things that most people are just left. They don't know either are some, or they just don't want to raise anything because they understood a number of things. But without a doubt, I'll just check on the chat box if there is something. I'm seeing something that is appearing now from Wieswa saying, and I read it, are there any specific tips you can give on getting executive support or sponsor in your company? Over to you.
Yeah, you can. Very interesting question. So I want to assume that most executives they have a bit of a power player character in them. And what you do in an organization, you aspire to certain positions in an organization. And there might be somebody in the organization that you like as a person, how they manage themselves, how they carry themselves, and what they've achieved in the organization. You go to that person might not even be your direct line. They might be in another unit. You set up an appointment with their PA and you introduce yourself and tell them your background and your aspirations. And you ask them that, you want them to be your mentor, and you at least want to book time in their diary once every quarter. To be 30 minutes. There'll be an agenda. It won't just be general. So think about a power player. A power player won't say no, because now somebody else in the organization who they can identify, probably you are a star in the organization, you are rising. And if a rising star can come to me and ask me to mentor them, then there's something in me. They're not likely to say no. And that's the beginning of your journey to the top. They can only say no, remember, but they'll remember that you took your time, you were proactive, and you know what you want. Hence, you approach them. I don't know if I've answered you.
Yeah, no. Thank you very much, Braesh, for such a very quiet and nice response. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just tried to check on number of the Q&A and the people who might be raising certain things on the chat. Actually, the person who asked the question is saying, yes, thank you very much. You have actually made the need. Thank you very much, Braesh. I'm actually going to move for closing because I'm seeing there is no any other movement of people who want to say something. I would like to take this opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to thank our one and only coach in business and coach in executives and actually in our roles in our daily lives and organizational life, Mr. Ashley Rasibuja himself. We have actually wanted to touch bases with him, but we managed to bring him more closer home today into the ranks of the Black Management Forum, specifically Young Professionals, one of its own. We are still celebrating the June Youth of 1976 today in 2021. And we have said, we have charted our way of developing young people and including them into various mainstream. While you are included into executive positions of all the kinds, you need to put in mind how to play the corporate politics. So I believe that today's session has actually made a bit in terms of addressing and making our lives aware on what we should do in the corporate world or in our organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, without very much ado, I would like to thank you very much for attending the session tonight. May I declare the session over. I'm still going to meet with you, by the way, on the 29th of June, while we are addressing the important part of the youth economics in our daily lives of today and the future. Thank you very much until we meet again. Thank you, Braesh. Thank you, all the people who have participated. I'm leaving it up to here. Thank you, BMF, technical support, and Mamel Lopez. Thank you.
Thank you.